Hey, I am the Greg, one of the hosts of the Greg and Dave Show. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hi everybody, this is Baxter Colburn from Public House Media. From all of us here at PHM, we'd like to thank you for your support and wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
This is Robert Gardner, host of Fantasy Wizards here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Fantasy Wizards, where we talk all about fantasy football. A new show comes out every Tuesday and Thursday night. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Fantasy Wizards. Thank you again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome to How to Write Good. I'm your host, Daniel Poppy. Find out more about me at danielpoppy.com. Poppy is spelled P-O-P-P-I-E. Find out more about How to Write Good. Well, find out more about How to Write Good there as well, I guess. Actually, you probably can find out more about How to Write Good if you actually listen to this. And follow How to Write Good on Facebook. Like and share the stuff if you enjoy it. Follow Public House Media because Public House Media brings you How to Write Good. How to like good, man. The word of the week, because we're going to get right into stuff because I think everything is going to take forever. Well, the word of the week is cold snap, and it's not one word, it's a term technically. And cold snap is a sudden and brief cold stint of weather. Because we are talking about, we have stuff related to winter, because it's winter, because whatever. So I'm giving you some vocabulary terms. I hope that it increases your vocabulary, but it's likely that you're never going to use this vocabulary in your life. Well, some of it maybe. Some of the stuff I've said before, maybe you'll use. You could use it. I think so. Most people don't really need a huge vocabulary. You kind of sound pompous if you have a huge vocabulary and you use it. I think most people I think that if you don't use it on purposely, like if you use specific words without thinking, it's different, or you try to be clear and you have to use a specific word to be clear, that's different. But if you're one of those people who uses words and you're like, oh, I used it, like some people use big words, it's like, okay, like I could have used a 3-letter word that would have fit that too. So I'm not a fan of that. I am a fan of having a big vocabulary, but I'm more of a fan of using it when you're writing rather than when you're speaking. So we're going to jump out of our vocabulary and into our accidental essence. And what we are talking about today is, should you like all the characters you write? Or should you like all characters in literature? And when I think about this, I think of Harry Potter, and I probably think of this more recently, and I'm saying I think of this because I'm rewatching Harry Potter. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but it's entertaining, so I'm watching it. But you think of the Professor Umbridge in Harry Potter, who is probably the most hateable character in all of literature, possibly. She's probably in the top 10. She's just awful because she's super annoying and frustrating. But connected to Harry Potter, one instance in my life, I used to say, no, you shouldn't like all the characters that you read, and you shouldn't like all the characters you make. And one instance of this that pops out in my mind, I think it's kind of weird how there's specific things in your life that just kind of like, there's at least for me, I don't know if this works for everybody in the same way, but there's specific memories in my life that are very like, they're just there and they kind of float around in my mind a lot and they move around a lot. But this is one of those. And I was going to a movie to see one of the Harry Potters, and I think it's the one where like the aunt or one of the, they're at the Dursleys, and then the aunt inflates and she floats up to the ceiling or whatever. So I think it's this third or fourth or something like that. I can't remember. But one of my friends was like, "Oh, I hate them so much. They're so awful. They're the worst." And what I said is, "Oh, that's good writing." Like, because the J.K. Rowling could write characters who were just so awful people hated them. And so I would say, no, you shouldn't like all characters. And I think most people would jump to that conclusion and say, no, you shouldn't like all characters. And I think that the reasoning is that, oh, you don't like all people who exist in the world, therefore you shouldn't like all characters. Okay? So you shouldn't like all people, therefore you shouldn't like all characters. I think that's the basic reasoning. You're trying to represent the world as clearly as possible. So you are saying, well, if the world's going to be represented as clearly as possible, you're not going to like all the characters in a book or a movie. I actually disagree now. I changed my mind. I've been thinking about it, and I think that you should not dislike characters. Let me rephrase that. You may dislike characters. You shouldn't hate characters. And I think that some people are against seeing characters in like you sympathize with characters even if they're bad. I'm actually not. Some people are, because some people think, oh, like you're making that person out to be an awful person. But we're going to get to that later, why I think that. So my mind changed because of Stephen King's quote, or something he said. And I don't even know if it was a quote. Maybe I was watching something with him talking. It was around the time, oddly enough, it was around the time that I was reading The Shining. And I don't know why I was watching or listening or reading stuff about what he was saying about stuff, because I don't care too much about what authors have to say about what you need to do to be a good writer. That sounds bad. That sounds like that just sounds like I'm not invested in this at all. I am invested in this at all. I just think that people should like learn how to write and do things by themselves, and they shouldn't, there's a certain, well, I mean, it goes back to why this was created. I don't want to be told how to write. I want to talk about ideas related to writing, but I don't want people to say, oh, you must do this, you must do that. So, but I'm repeating myself. But what Stephen King said is I never disliked any of my characters. And like I said, you know, those ideas, those memories that roll around in your brain, this idea just continued to roll around in my brain for a long time. And I continue to have the idea, oh, like people can dislike characters because that's a representation of reality. You dislike people in the reality, why shouldn't you dislike characters? But this kept on rolling around in my brain. It kept on getting me thinking. It's just weird how, it's taking a little break. It's really interesting how the power of people's words in your life, because there are specific instances where someone said something and it's stuck with me my whole entire life, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Luckily for me, I've forgotten all the bad things that people have said. There's probably still things like ideas I have in my head related to those bad things, like towards me, or bad ideas in general. But your words have tons of power in people's lives, and I think that it's interesting because you don't always realize it. And even if you don't necessarily, even if you don't necessarily know the person, like if I wrote something and someone read it, they may say, "Oh, that's a really good idea," or maybe I don't actually work like anybody else, but I highly doubt that. Maybe they may hear like one phrase from me, or one phrase from you, even like whatever. And one phrase from anybody listening to this is a lot better than something from me. So I don't know why you're listening, but they may hear one thing and it may roll around in their head and completely change their mind about something. And like in terms of what I think about whether you should like or dislike characters, it's to a certain degree irrelevant. Well, maybe it's not irrelevant. I don't necessarily think it's irrelevant, but it's something that's such a niche thought that it's not going to make a huge impact on tons and tons and tons of people, maybe. But there may be something else related to it that will. But there may be something that you say that rolls around in somebody's mind for days and days and days and years, and it just sticks with them. So going back, but I kind of got lost my train of thought. So Stephen King said, I never disliked one of my characters. Okay, and I kept on thinking about this. He didn't say that you shouldn't dislike characters. He was just saying I never disliked the ones he wrote. He'd never disliked one of his own. So I'm going to give you a couple reasons, maybe three. Maybe I'll touch on something else. I had three reasons, and I realized one of the reasons really doesn't fit, but I have two right now. So my first reason is that books are entertainment, okay, and they're there for enjoyment. They're generally written so people can just take a break from the world. And why should someone just be so frustrated and mad the entire time they're reading something? Yeah, like it doesn't have to completely represent the world. The books don't clearly represent reality because we've got a lot of weird stuff going on. Like in Harry Potter, you've got witches and wizards and stuff like that. So like it doesn't really represent the world completely. I think there's basic truths in books that can represent the world, but I mean, it's there for entertainment. People want to get away from the world. They don't want to have to think about the world. This is why I'm really against, I'm not a big fan of like morals in stories, or like a very overt moral, like, oh, like this is why the story is written, or there's a social idea, there's something going on in the world that's bad, and somebody writes a book they write this book to they write this book to tackle this issue, and I'm not a big fan of those, because I think a big aspect of reading and the big aspect of literature is getting away from the world. A big aspect of any type of entertainment, any type of storytelling, is to kind of abstract things from the world and not have to think about the world as it exists in front of your face. And I think that it's doing a really big disservice, these people who write fiction books that are solely for the purpose of dealing with a specific issue that's currently in the world. I think that there are certain instances, like there are things in the world. You can write a book, you can write a movie, I think, that has real world things in it, like issues that exist in the real world. But the sole purpose of the book, the sole purpose of the thing you're creating, it should be a really good story. But oftentimes these things that are written, they just shove these ideas into the story, and then it just ruins the story. You could have had so much of a better story, and your point, the thing you're trying to like get across, could have been so much better if you just took it away from the world we're in and you just made it like something that people could get lost in. I think that it's a lot more impactful on people than trying to just shove something in and being so overt about something that it just beats them down with it. So books are just entertainment, like I said, and it doesn't seem like a really good escape from reality to me if you're always frustrated, even if the awful person in the book gets like justice served at the end. So if there's justice served to this awful person, at the same time, like, With going back to Umbridge in Harry Potter, I don't really think it's satisfying. It's satisfying in that moment, but it really doesn't make up for the awful character she is in the book. So I don't think it really balances it out. The second reason, maybe I'll do three reasons. I don't know. A second reason is so you're trying to clearly represent reality, and this goes kind of with the first one, I think. Maybe you can't actually clearly represent reality. And therefore, since it is an escape, since it shouldn't just clearly represent reality, maybe it should paint a picture. Maybe it should take reality in a specific way, and it should use it in a specific way and recreate a new reality that is disconnected from reality. And it goes back to that idea of escapism and getting away from the world. A little tangent on this. So in terms of representing reality, I could have a whole episode on this, and maybe I will someday. But books, so writing is weird, and I think that communication is really weird. Conversation is really weird. Anytime you're writing something down as a writer, as an author, a writer, whatever you are, you're writing specific things. You've got specific ideas in your head, and you are hoping that you're trying your best to write it as clearly as possible. At least you should be, I think. If you're writing and you're not trying to write as clearly as possible, I don't know what you're doing. But you're writing and you're trying to write as clearly as possible in the hopes that the person who's reading it understands what is written in the same way that you understand what is written. But I don't think that ever happens. And I think that books are really cool in this way, because words are ambiguous in a lot of ways, because people experience things differently, because people put different meanings on words. I think books are really cool, because if I write a book, or if anyone writes a book, and I have 10 people read that book, and there is no movie, because movies change how you view books, and I almost think, like, if I ever wrote a really big book, or any book in general, I would be really, really hesitant to let anyone make it into a movie, because I'd just be so scared that it would lose. Like, if people really liked it, I'd almost want to be dead. I'd almost want to be dead before it gets made into a movie, because then after it's made into a movie, that is the book. That is how people think of it. If you read Harry Potter, people think of the movies. If you read Lord of the Rings now, people will think of how Lord of the Rings was in movie format. When I started reading Lord of the Rings before the movies, it was it was a lot more interesting. Well, it's still interesting, but there was so much more going on in my head than after, because after the movies, and even so after the movies, there's so much information in those books that there's a lot left to think about. But after the movies came out, you think of it in the pattern of the movies, and anything that does that, you think of it in the pattern of the movies. But if you take a book that's written and you give it to 10 different people, and it isn't a movie yet, nobody's seen it as a movie, and you have them read it, each one of those people is going to have a different idea in their head, a different picture in their head of what's going on. It's going to be the same book, it's going to have the same story, but they're going to play that movie in their mind out in a different way. All right, so the third reason, and this is the reason that I stand by, and this isn't the first reason, this isn't the reason I had at first, but this is the conclusion I've come to. So I've gone through saying, no, I think that you should like characters. I think that you should at least have sympathy for all characters, and I said that before for other reasons, but then I finally developed into this reason. I like it the best, and I think that I'm probably going to stick with it. And I mean, I'll keep on thinking about it, but I think the premise is wrong. Okay? I think the premise about how books represent reality is wrong. That's the premise I mean. So before, I said that people who say, oh, you should dislike characters because because there are people in your life that you dislike, therefore there are going to be characters in books that you dislike as well. Okay? So I think that this view is looking at the surface of things. And I think that when a person does this, it's hard to communicate what I'm saying even right now. The best way I can think of to say it is that someone is communicating a reality just based on the five senses. Okay, they are saying it's very superficial. It's just when you look at when you look at a character you really, really hate, you're looking at the outward appearance of that character. I think that stories shouldn't be based off this outward appearance. Stories shouldn't just present this outward reality, and they should be based off of the core of something. So this is kind of going back to the essence. So I don't know if I talked about that with the logic episode, but when I talked about logic, the first aspect of logic it's called the first act of the mind. It talks about definitions, but what it's really trying to do is find the essence of a thing. And what the essence is, if I can't remember if I talked about it or not, so I will right now. The essence of a thing is, if you have something, what is that thing if you took all the extra things away that aren't that thing? Okay? So who am I if I take all these extra things away? Is part of being a human being, does it require, is it having 2 arms and 2 legs? Is it being healthy? Is it having an IQ of an IQ of 120 or 160 or whatever? Is that what a human, the essence of a human being? If there was a perfect human being, we've got this perfect image of a human being, what would the aspects of this human being be? And this is kind of what I'm saying in terms of writing, or getting to the core. So you're getting to the kernel, or the kernel or the seed of what something is, and then everything else comes from this idea. So let's get back to talking about characters, because I got off on a little bit of a tangent right here. Getting back to talking about characters and liking them, and then I'm going to apply it further actually. So with this, I was talking about the essence, looking at the essence of what something is, looking at the core. What is that? If there was this is the best way to say it. So if there's a prototype of something, everything follows this pattern. Everything follows the pattern. So with humanity, with humans, what is a prototype human that everything else must follow the pattern of? Okay? If that makes sense. So there is a specific there's this, if let's just say a car, there's a prototype car, and to be considered a car, the other cars created after have to have specific features of the car. In the same way, there's a prototype human. To be a human after that human, it has to have specific features of that prototype human. Okay, and it goes with anything else. You could apply this to any possible thing on Earth. You could say, oh, a prototype cheetah, a prototype bicycle, anything. If the prototype informs what you need to have something classified as a specific thing. And in terms of humanity, the prototype human determines what you need to have something classified as a human. I hope that makes sense, because it's a weird way to say it, but that's probably the best way to say it. With characters, so if you hate a character, you hate the character in the book. All right, I got that. You may hate someone in real life, because some people are extremely annoying. Most of the time, people don't hate somebody else. But if you could actually see what this person is and see them as a human, like completely, I don't actually think you'd hate them. Now, in real life, I think that if you hate somebody, you've in some way dehumanized them. You've taken one aspect of them, and you've blown that aspect to be their whole entire person, if that makes sense. You've taken, maybe they do something you really don't like. Maybe they, so perhaps you have someone who killed somebody, and you take that one aspect of them, and then you make their whole entire person about that one aspect, and then you hate them for it. Or you may, this goes back to like things like racism. You do not like a specific race of people, so you see one person, you make their whole entire person just that race, you hate them for it. Or you maybe don't like a specific group of people, like another group, not a race, just someone else in general. Maybe you are on one political side of the spectrum or the other, and then you see the other side and you make that person on the other side that specific thing. You have an idea of what this specific thing is in your mind, you make them completely into that, and then you hate them for it. And I'm being redundant, but I'm giving too many examples and you're just getting sick of my examples. So if you could actually see someone, I think you would. It's not I think you would. You would. You'd realize that people are a lot more complex than what you've made them out to be. And I think this goes for anyone. Like if I could actually understand anyone I know completely, I would see just how complex they are. And I would actually see how sympathetic. Like I think that if you actually could see a person's whole entire life, you could get to the core of who they are, see the humanity behind them. You'd actually be really sympathetic towards them, no matter who they are. I really do. I don't know why. That's like I have to like kind of say this is where I don't have my argument anymore. Like I say, I think you would. I think this is the reason behind why I say this, that you should like characters, or at least be sympathetic toward them. Because I can't. It's like a thought. It's a thought experiment. You can't actually prove it, but you can go through this logic. You can kind of walk through it, and you can think about people. And I think that whoever you're going to think about, you're going to find, oh, even the most annoying person, maybe that person has a really good sense of humor, or an evil person may have maybe an excellent parent, or there's other aspects of this. And I think that, history can kind of teach us that people aren't just awful things they do. People aren't just annoying things they do. Like if you think of John Wayne Gacy. Now, when I think of John Wayne Gacy, I think of a nasty, nasty, nasty dude because of the stuff he did. But at the same time, he was charismatic. Before people knew what he did, people really liked having him around, and his neighbors enjoyed his company. Or you think of more recently in the past, maybe like 10 years ago now, 10 years ago, like the BTK killer, who was an elder in his church. So there were people around him who saw other aspects of his person. And then you have somebody like Hitler, who I believe he was engaged, right? I think he was engaged. Did he get married to her or not? Eva Braun. I don't know if he got married to her. I think he did before he died. But somebody thought he was good enough to get engaged to, which is, I think that they did, these three people did really, really, really awful things. But at the same time, they are still humans, okay? And what this kind of goes, most people, like we've taken one aspect. There's a lot of different aspects of these people that are bad, but at this, like there's other aspects that are good as well, okay? And what I'm saying is I'm not trying to excuse what these people did. I'm just trying to say, hey, if you looked at anyone, I am convinced that you would see a person. Like if you could see anyone in their complete life, you'd say, hey, like they did a lot of really awful things, and I really wouldn't want to be around them. But like I see them not just as a killer or somebody awful or someone annoying. Maybe let's bring it down a little bit. I don't see them as someone annoying. I see them as actually a human being, and I think it's a big issue with people. I think it's a big issue to take people from history or take people we see who we don't know and we see one aspect of their lives. And even if they did atrocious things, I think that you cannot make them non-human. You can't say, oh, that person did this, this, and this, therefore they are not classified as human anymore. So I've named 3 really, really nasty people. John Wayne Gacy, the BTK killer, and Hitler did really bad things, but they're not monsters. Those 3 people aren't monsters. They're human beings. And I think that whether you believe this or not, whether you ascribe to the Christian faith or not, I think that the Christian faith has a very unique, I guess that it's the Jewish faith as well, so it's like Judeo-Christian, has a very unique idea about what a human being is. And I think even if you don't really believe it's a really interesting idea. And because the Christians and the Jews believe that that humans aren't just good or evil. So they don't say, oh, humans are evil, and they don't say humans are good. They have this idea of humans have a potential to do wonderful things, and then they have this idea of humans have a potential to do terrible things. And this idea, the reason why they believe that, the reason why Christians and the Jews believe that people have an extreme potential for good and an extreme potential for evil is because they believe that they're made in the image of God, and then that image has been marred. So I think that whether you are a Christian, whether you're a Jew or not, I think it's a really interesting idea. And it's really, in terms of the United States, that's kind of what are the basic rights in the United States are built off of. This idea that, at least at the founding of the United States, is built off of this idea that people are made in the image of God. So they are a special creation, a special creature, if you want to say it that way. But yeah, so like I said, so if there is a being who is made in the image of God, then but at the same time, this being has been twisted in some way. There's going to be a lot of things that come out of that being that is going to be really, really, really good, and there's going to be a lot of things coming out of that being that can be really, really awful as well, because it's just the will that being has will. So whether you believe in it or not, I think it's at the very least a good metaphor for what humans are, and it's a good way of at least starting your thought life, whatever your thought life is. So I do not think you should hate characters because characters in books represent human beings, and if they are written truthfully, then there is always something redeemable in that human being. Okay, so that characters are an abstraction from reality. So when you are writing characters in a book, and everything in a book is an abstraction from reality, everything writing is an abstraction. Because you're taking reality, and you're taking things from reality, and you're taking ideas, you're extracting ideas from it, you're putting it on a paper, so it's an abstraction. But characters are an abstraction, and when you're writing characters, I think that you are trying to find basic truths about humans. You're looking at someone, you're looking at a specific character type. You're looking at a specific type of person, but you're not just trying to write a character type. You're trying to actually see that character, that person that represents this character type as an actual, as they are in reality. And you have to look at, from my perspective, in terms of writing, you have to look at basic truths in relation to writing, and basic truths in relation to how this person functions, who this person is, to actually write them honestly. And like I said, and if I think that it does go back to writing things as reality is, and if you write things honestly, and if you write people honestly, I think you're going to end up finding out that you actually find sympathy with the characters, because first of all, there are tons of good things in people's lives, and no matter if somebody is awful, I think there are always going to be good things that they do. There's always going to be something that's good in their lives. There's always going to be something that is you're not all bad, I guess. There's stuff that you do that I don't like, or stuff that you do that's just completely awful. But there's also stuff that just like doesn't seem to fit with this awful stuff. Which, like I said, it goes back to that Christian idea of people being made in the image of God, but being twisted. Which there's like a contradiction in humanity. So I think that's why I think that you should at least sympathize with characters, and I think that it's okay to have sympathetic bad characters because they should represent real humans, and real humans are actually sympathetic creatures. Okay, we are going to jump to our fallacy of the week because it's almost the end of the podcast, so I'm going to be going through this like a flash. The fallacy, it doesn't take very long actually. The fallacy of the week is correlation proves causation, and what it means is just because two things are correlated, one does not cause the other. I think that a lot of, and it's a very, if you go to college, if you go into any science class, you're going to run into a lot of correlation does not equal causation. The thing about logic and the thing about logical fallacies is it's a lot harder to practice in your daily life because you do not have someone pointing out all your logical fallacies. So that is it. My last thought before I go, which is going nowhere because I'm just going to be sitting in the same spot. But I did a project about another culture recently, and I realized that a lot of other cultures, they celebrate their holidays like crazy. They love their holidays. And in the West, specifically the West, and I think even more specifically in the United States, we are kind of like taught in a way that we shouldn't celebrate our holidays, that we shouldn't get really excited about our holidays, that we shouldn't just go wild with them, that we should, I think there is, to me, it seems to be like there's a lot of shame. Like it's like, oh, we can't like celebrate this or that or this or whatever. We can't like ourselves. There is in the West a sense that you should go against your typical cultural norm. I don't know. It's just a thing about it. But I thought my nose was going to bleed. But in other cultures, a lot of other cultures, they celebrate their holidays like crazy. And I think we should do it in the United States. I think we should go crazy about our holidays. Like, so for Christmas, I think there should be like the whole entire month of December should just be Christmas stuff. Not just like people decorating, just like there should be like a Christmas parade, and then there should be like an Advent walk, and then there should be another thing like that. And people might say, well, there's other holidays going on like that, but most people celebrate Christmas in the United States, and like you don't have to have it as a public thing, but you can still have it, like you can have a community come together and just do it. Also, like not just Christmas, we could do New Year's. Like there are a lot of stuff that goes on on New Year's, but we could do even more. And I think like we could do stuff during Easter. But like I keep on going to religious holidays, even the 4th of July. I think that we should just go wild. Everything should be red, white, and blue. We should just like have tons of fireworks. Every single house should have like 1 billion fireworks and all shoot them off at the same time. It should just be wild. We should have billions of hot dogs to eat. We should just line the streets with hot dogs. We should have a whole week. Every single major holiday should have a week where we just go crazy. And we should all take it off and just like flood the streets and just fill them up and have huge parties. So that's my 2 cents. I think we should do it because I think it'd be really fun. I mean, it's really stupid because people are like, oh, they go to other cultures where countries where they have really big religious celebrations, and these people who don't really care about religion, they're like, oh, it's so cultural, and they take part in these religious celebrations. They're not part of the religion, so it's kind of dumb. But they take part in these religious celebrations, and they go home, they're like, oh, it was so cultural, it was so cool. And it's just like, yeah, it was so cool because they went wild. Imagine if we did that here in the United States. I think that we should do that. So this is How to Write Good. My name is Daniel Poppy. I will not see you next week because I never see you. All right, see you later. It's going to snow soon.